This is an extremely exciting class for me today. I'll be talking to my very dear good friend, Lisa Dozier King, who is a phenomenal theater producer and altogether amazing human being. Lisa is the reason that Miami New Drama got off to the great start we did. Lisa was there from the very beginning of Miami New Drama until about 2 years ago when Broadway came calling. She became the general manager for the Broadway show. Be More Chill. And Lisa has been killing it ever since. I am just so impressed about Lisa as a person. Lisa is able to do 17 things at once and do it brilliantly, and at the same time have an amazing, beautiful family, and it's just an inspiration, you know, for me to know and to work with somebody as wonderful as Lisa. So with that introduction, Lisa, welcome to this week's MasterMiND class where we're going to be talking about producing. How are you doing, Lisa? Do you miss Miami?
I do, and I miss your face, and I miss the colony, and I miss making shows with you, my friend.
Yes, I miss that very much, and I look forward to a moment that we'll be able to do it again. But in your honor, we lit the Colony Theater last weekend. It was a wonderful light show, and you know, after the purpose, I'll just now say that it was because of you that we did it to celebrate you, to celebrate. You know, it was all red when you got in there. It was all red, and that was definitely in honor of our ginger goddess, Lisa Dozier King. All right, Lisa. So we're gonna. I just want to talk a little bit about the structure of this. We're going to talk a little bit about how you got into producing, and then mainly we're going to spend time about what it is and what it entails to produce theater at a regional theater, at a commercial venture. You know, Lisa teaches theater producing. You know, she taught at UM, and now she's going to tell us all about the new program that she is starting. So Lisa is an expert at teaching producing. So we're going to try to get all that knowledge into an hour and 20 minutes. And then we're going to open the space for questions and answers. All right. So is it me or there's a terrible noise? I think it's coming from my end. Can you hear me all right?
It sounds a little like you're in a basement at a club, but I can hear you fine.
I am outdoors, but I have this wonderful background. Anyways, all right, Lisa, I'll try to mute myself when I speak, so that when you speak, sorry. Anyways, tell us how did you get into, you know, briefly, how did you get into producing?
Sure. So I have done theater and loved theater since the 4th grade. And I went to Florida State and basically went into the dean's office my first week or two of school. And I said, I love doing theater. I know that I'm not destined to be an actor. I love community involvement. I love working with people. I love working with artists. What can I do? And he said, you should be a producer and a general manager. You should investigate that. So I did. And then 2 days later, I've been on that track and that path ever since. I had a wonderful education in the Florida State Theater Department. And then I went on to have internships at New York Stage and Film, American Repertory Theater. And I was in Boston and deciding whether or not to stay. And I've always known, even though I only went to New York 3 times as a kid, that New York was my hometown. I moved around a lot as a child, and I knew New York was going to be where I was going to spend most of my adult life. So I ended up in New York with $300 in my pocket after I paid my first and last month's rent, and was lucky enough to get a job at the new 42nd Street, working for their general manager as his assistant, one of the best bosses I have ever had. And then I went on to work in the artistic office at Manhattan Theatre Club. And from there, I worked at several nonprofits during the day and was doing downtown theater producing at night. So my goal was I was learning from the greats in the industry here in New York, and I was also learning how to do it downtown. And it's been really rewarding all these years later to see these downtown artists and everything that they've done in their careers in that time and how we've all grown together. And then I had an exciting surprise opportunity to move down to Miami to teach at the University of Miami. I was doing a tour for Daryl Roth's company down there. And the assistant director said, you need to meet my dear friend, Michel Hausman. He has a dream and your dreams are similar and you should meet. And I was lucky enough to get on Michel's train in the forming of Miami New Drama, which is one of the most rewarding things and things I'm most proud of in my entire career. So then I had a series of projects while I was running my business up here in New York that led me back up here. And now I'm a friend of the court of Miami New Drama and miss my family down there very much. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the 5-minute recap.
But you know, it's amazing. Something that it always struck me as very interesting is that you managed to sort of become the producer in New York for a very specific kind of like off-Broadway, mainly commercial off-Broadway shows at Theater Row. That because it's strange to try to make off-Broadway profitable, but you happen to be involved in a ton of shows that tried, and some of them achieved that. How did you get into that specific, you know, universe?
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not quite sure how I fell so grounded in the off-Broadway scene, but I really love it because I love the hands-onness of it. And they say 1 in 5-ish, and that could be very generous, Broadway shows makes its money back in the commercial world. Off-Broadway, it's harder. There aren't the full stats on that, but it's even more challenging. Yeah, and so I love, I mainly do this for a living because I love working with artists. I love working with artists who are passionate, who are caring, artists with integrity, and not just talent, like yourself. So the off-Broadway scene is ripe with that. And there are so many different levels of off-Broadway, right? So there are the smaller off-Broadway theaters that are in the 100, 150 seat range. And then it goes all the way up to 499 seats. And I've done everything, every which way. And I realized my bio says 100 productions here, but I think I'm pushing 200 now. Most of those are off-Broadway productions. So
it's impressive. You know, Lisa, the first, you know, when somebody meets you and has sort of like a first, you almost seem unreal. You know, theater is full talk more, and everybody's a producer. Everybody's, you know, because everybody can invest on shows. Everybody's a producer, no? But so if anybody meets you, you almost seem too good to be true. You almost seem like it's impossible to have done what you've done at the age that you've done, but it's impressive, you know, and really, the more you start to scratch the surface, you really realize that not only Lisa has, you know, produced all these plays, but when she's there, she sometimes is the one, you know, making sure that the person putting up the light is not falling down. Like, you know, you really are, you know, invested in the minutia of what it is to be, you know, what it is to put up a play, to, you know, to managing the media and the payroll. And so I've always been extremely, you know, impressed by you. And I've said that a few times, but I just, you know, every time I have a chance to say it, I'll say it again. So let's zero in, because I want, you know, people who are thinking about, you know, what it is, you know, that they might want to be a producer. walk us through different examples of producing. And I would say, let's talk about an off-Broadway show or a small off-Broadway show. Let's talk about rather large off-Broadway show.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about a regional, a regional theater, Miami New Drama type of show, and then let's talk about a Broadway show.
Great.
Start us off small and work our way through to Broadway. What does it entail to be a producer of a small 99-seat show in New York? What's that like? Yes.
So with a lot of it has changed since I was working more fully downtown. So I may have some outdated information on that, but the core of it is probably still pretty similar. The important foundation for this part of the discussion is the distinction, which is often a very blurred line between a general manager and a producer. And often it's all encompassing. The general manager regardless of what we're talking about, what type of production, and there are different titles, whether it's nonprofit or commercial for this, but this role, let's call it the general manager role, because it's what we call it in commercial theater. This is the right hand of the producer. Sometimes it's the same person, but the general manager is the person who's responsible and one of the first people hired. It's typically the attorney and the general manager get hired on a project to put all of the building blocks and the foundation in place. The most important thing that the general manager does early on is create the budget. So the budget size obviously varies very greatly, and we can talk about each one of those tiers, Michelle. But I think of myself when I am making a budget as a member of the creative team. I am making the financial design of which everybody will be using when they are creating their vision of the show. So that's a crucial part of what I do. And that's technically the general management component, but when I'm also executive producing, they're often tied together, right? So that is a building block, an early building block of the foundation of the whole production. So when we're talking 99-seat venues here in New York, those are showcase venues according to Actors Equity. So they're not technically employment because often the stipend the actors get is not minimum wage.
Right.
We are all thinking that will quickly change. And again, the rules have been updated since I did a showcase production. But basically, it's your budget is supposed to be $35,000, I believe, is the cap, which is a near impossibility to make all of that work. They have made some new rules in the last 8-ish years of what can be excluded from that, including theater rent, et cetera, the actor stipends. But still doing a show, when I do consulting for artists that want to produce their own work and do it on a showcase, it is very tricky to manage that budget threshold here. It's right. Obviously very expensive even to put on the smallest of productions here. So. Absolutely.
I mean, and that's a struggle of theater. You'll find it at any different layer. It always costs more than what you can when you can. Only a handful of shows manage to achieve that. So, all right. So, for example, in a small showcase, what does marketing look like for how much would you spend? Would you allocate to marketing on a showcase production?
So for a showcase, and then we'll talk about the off-Broadway tiers, because then you get into a layer of more staff, more expertise. Showcases will sometimes have somebody facilitating the marketing. It's almost never a marketing firm. And then that budget, I don't like to do showcases for less than a $40,000 marketing budget. Again, it's been several years since I've done one. But when you get into off-Broadway with the marketing budget, we typically structure those as limited engagements, and we can talk about the venues up here because it's very hard to get a theater. I won't let a client do a show for less than a $75,000 marketing budget if there's a 6-week run. And
that's for an off-Broadway show. for an off-Broadway show.
Yeah.
And you know, so where would you allocate that money? How much of it would be, you know, print or radio or you know, social media?
So for a showcase, you're dealing with such limited dollars and the bandwidth of that the lion's share of it will go to social media, paid spots, and will go to select e-blasts. With the saturation of the market with the e-blast, it can be tricky to kind of make a dent in the marketplace, but that's where you'll generally get the biggest bang, you know, for your buck. And then when you jump to off-Broadway, there's an overwhelming amount of utilizing the e-blast and digital because print can be so expensive.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting you speak about the e-blast. I remember, you know, I have seen the devaluation of the e-blast and obviously also the devaluation of print that kind of happened at the same time. You know, when we were doing Golden of Havana, you know, that's, you know, 5 years ago, we would purchase an e-blast from the Miami, and it would, you know, might cost $1,000 and it would bring us $5,000 in sales, right? And the same for a full page of the Herald. It would cost $1,000 and it would give us, you know, $4,000 or $5,000. And then as years goes by, you know, as the years went by, you know, an e-blast wasn't as lucrative anymore. It would still cost $1,000, but it might bring us $1,500.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, definitely I saw how that became, you know, the e-blast saturation made it so that, you know, now everybody's sending e-blasts and e-blasts are not as open as before. But anyway, so now I mean, let's talk about the off-Broadway tier, and you know, give us a little bit more understanding of what that team looks like, what, you know, what the marketing strategies are in general, but what, you know, of course, now we're talking about a larger creative team and a larger staff around the show. Walk us a little bit through that if you can.
Sure. So again, with and to close the button on downtown theater, if anybody listening to this is interested in getting into the theater scene in New York in any capacity, downtown theater is just a wonderful way, particularly if you're right out of college or you're college aged and not going to college and just jumping right into the craft. Once we're through this pandemic, downtown theater is a wonderful way to make contacts that really can last your entire career. And it's so hard, but it's like earning your stickers here in New York, and I highly recommend it. So with off-Broadway, which is also has its own challenges, there are a wide variety of, like I mentioned, sizes of production, and that means budgets as well. So the first off-Broadway shows that I started doing, I don't know, between 13 and 15 years ago now, were mostly the smaller theaters, right? And those budgets now are, I would say, at about $1 million. I advise clients not to do less than a 6-week engagement. Having the venues for commercial theater off-Broadway are kind of divided into 2 schools of thought. One is if you are able to get a space where you're allowed to have an open-ended run, which is typically announced anyway as a limited engagement, but that's where you can continue extending and you have the flexibility to do that. So prior to COVID, shows that were experiencing that were shows like Little Shop of Horrors revival, Rock of Ages, Jersey Boys, those venues. Then there's the limited engagements that are generally strictly limited engagements with little flexibility to extend. And that the lion's share of those venues are nonprofit venues that are renting their spaces to the nonprofits are renting to these commercial productions. So when I am utilizing my contacts and my networking with these venues, I work very hard to get my clients 8 to 12 week slots, which can be tricky. But if you're putting a show up and it's just for a month up here, you're going to get lost. So you need the time to build your audience and kind of and build that momentum before you close. So with the marketing of that, that falls into it, right? If you're only marketing a show that's running for a couple of weeks up here, you're going to market it and people are going to be like, what happened to that show? Oh, it already closed. So you want to be able to have the time to get audiences to know your show, to get critics to actually come and review it. Reviewing off-Broadway has gotten harder as newspapers are suffering and cutting their staff. And with marketing, again, that minimum jump for me is $75,000 for small.
And how would you allocate those monies?
So I typically will not, unless it's a very special circumstance, I hire a marketing firm to work with me at this level that can do a full fleshed out plan. And that's for a few reasons. Obviously, I have the wherewithal and the foundation as a general manager and producer to have my own opinions on these, and having been in countless marketing meetings and ensconced in that version of the expertise of marketing. But marketing directors and agencies, this is what they live and breathe, right? They're
Right.
in and out every day dealing with a myriad of projects and dealing with a myriad of vendors. So they can get the best rates in addition to having a full fleshed out plan.
Right, but so for example, have you noticed that in general there seems to be a way of allocating it that makes sense for different shows, or is it a matter of, oh, well, this show right here might appeal to a younger crowd, and so that's more of a social media. This show right here is an older Jewish crowd, so we might do print. Like, how do you see that? Is that part of the strategy?
Very much so, and that happens early on. So when the marketing firms are being interviewed, we'll have meetings with each of them, and they'll give us some prelim thoughts on it, on the project, and then when they're hired, we will have a full breakdown session of that. What the key words are, what the themes of the script are. The demographic, who's in the cast, who's on the creative team. These are huge selling points when you're dealing with new work, which most of the body of work in New York is new. So all of those things get broken down, and the marketing agency with their expertise does a very detailed, full out marketing plan that's customized for each production based on those variables.
Right. So for example, as we all know, Broadway is a very international tourist destiny, right? But off Broadway is typically more of a local, right? It's a local. So how and also when you're talking about local, there's also different neighborhoods. There's bridge and tunnel people. There's so how do you see this? When you're working on a specific off Broadway production, do you see a map and say like, oh, this is more of an Upper West Side type of show, or do you see this as how do you see it?
Very much so, and that goes all the way up and all the way down on producing here with production sizes. I mean, for example, a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago now, I was doing a very charming hipster musical off Broadway, and we were in the marketing meeting, and we were talking about which zip codes we were going to target our online and our reach to. And it was a hipster musical, right? So some of the old guard was saying we should target to the Brooklyn area codes. And I in the meeting, I spoke up and I said, no, we should target to the college towns in Jersey. That's who we should go to. Because that's the audience that will envision themselves, because it was meant for 20-year-olds, right? That's the audience that will envision themselves moving to Williamsburg, right? So it's all about those strategies. And I feel this way, Michelle, you know this very, very much in my philosophy of management, and marketing meetings are a big part of that. For me, a collaboration and a respect is crucial for the success of a production. And I like to say a safe space is not always a comfortable place, because I want to work with people who want to challenge each other for the show to be the best it can be. So that happens in a lot of marketing meetings. And there's often the differing opinions, and the best opinion should always win and be heard.
Absolutely. It's a Darwinian of opinions. That's absolutely right. So tell me a little bit about what does your team look like for an off-Broadway show?
So there's with the management and producing, right? There's kind of two areas. There's all of the we'll call them the admin team, for lack of a better word, the management, the producing team, and we'll break that down. And then there's the creatives, right? So there's kind of two sides, and sometimes there's the crossover, but often it's two different parts of my brain dealing with these the two groups, right? So the creative team, we have the writer, the director, and then all the trickle down with the designers, the cast, all of those team members, the stage manager. And then on the producing end, we have the marketing team, we have the publicist, which is a crucial component in these marketing meetings and this brainstorming as well. And then we'll have a company manager, especially on bigger shows, that's facilitating some of the day-to-day under the general manager, and is often the liaison between these two teams. That is a crucial track. And then there are often assistants and associates that fall into each of these lines.
Interesting. And so, you know, who decides the ticketing aspect of it? You know, does every theater have a box office that all tickets need to go through there? Or, you know, do you get to choose what, you know, ticketing system will you use for a specific show?
It varies venue to venue, and if you're on Broadway, you use the theater owner, the landlord. You use their ticketing system and their box office staff and their union. As far as
off Broadway,
it varies. There are some venues that you go through their system, like Signature, which is a major rental house here, and then there are other venues that you can pick your own ticketing system, and you hire your own box office per show. It depends on the venue. And that's how it becomes handy with how my office, how we've worked in most of these venues. We know it inside and out, because that goes back to the original duty of doing the budgeting, right? That has to be factored in. So
right. So okay, so let's listen. Let's do this exercise. You know, walk me. You know, I go to you and I said, Lisa, I found a musical called Manatee the Musical.
I'm sure
I want to. You sure that exists?
That exists somewhere.
Okay, so I go to you and I say, I want this show to be off Broadway. You know, what do I need to? You know, can you help me produce it? Can you produce it? So walk me through everything you would tell you know, Michelle about how to produce Manatee the Musical.
Okay. If it wasn't you, because I'll do any project with you, to do every one, I will do it. If it was somebody cold approaching my office or through a contact, I would first ask them to send me the materials. I would do probably a phone call or a quicker meeting, and then I would read the script and often have my team read the script, because they're also in the trenches working on it as well. And we would talk about it and decide if it was the right fit for our company. For me, there are a million reasons to do a project. One is if the script is outstanding. Two is if it's an artist, the director or the writer, or a producer, if we're just managing, that we really want to work with. Three is if it's somebody that we already know. Four is if it's at a venue where we haven't done work or we love them and want to be a part of it. So all of those variables can get factored into whether we decide in the mutual interview process if this is a good fit. So let's say this is not you, it's somebody else, and they're bringing me Manatee the Musical, and I read it, I'm like, this is quite charming. So then I will have a fuller meeting with this person, whether it's an artist wanting to, jump on, or there's, they have a producer, however that works. I'll meet with that team, right? The team that wants to get the show up. I typically do not raise money for projects. I have in the past, but when I am executive producing and general managing, it's about the function and the expertise and the day-to-day. So I will often ask what the interest is with where they are in the project. Sometimes they think they have a venue, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're starting from the very beginning. And sometimes, and often off Broadway, they're first-time producers, right? So we have a very long meeting, and I talk to them about questions that I ask range from what was the inspiration for Manatee the Musical to what, why do you want to do this? Where do you see this going? And I let them tell me the vision. And often the vision is they want to go straight to Broadway, and we have that full discussion on it. Again, part of my job is to embrace everybody and empower the artists, but also I never want to give false hope to people. I want to give them what my opinion is for the best way forward. And sometimes that ends up not being the right way, but with my impression of reading the script. So we talk all the way through that. We talk through who's on the team, who's not, where they are in their development stage. A lot of times scripts will come to me that aren't ready, and everybody thinks they're ready. And we have that moment of, well, can we raise $75,000 and do a workshop before we, you know.
That must be a hard conversation to have when somebody really wants to get it off Broadway, and you have the responsibility of, yeah, but I don't want you to go there and fail.
Yeah, it is. And when it's a new person, that's challenging because so much of this is built on trust and relationships. So when you're having to tell somebody their dream is not quite there yet, that can be hard, but it's also a really crucial part of what I do. I will never lie to somebody to collect a check. My heart is too much in this industry and respect for artists to do that. So then from there, we'll decide the production structure, right? The goals, the benchmarks, where we want to end up, limited off-Broadway engagement, whether we want to tour, if we want to do concerts, if we end up wanting to film it, all of those things. And we'll put all these ingredients into the soup, and then I will cook the soup with the budget. That's the first time I've ever used that cliche. That's a new one. And then we'll go from there and start to really jump in once everybody's agreed. While that's happening, and we're doing all of those creative things and planning what the company is, we'll also be talking to an attorney to make sure we're doing, for commercial theater, we're doing our fundraising legally and above board. So I'll be creating a budget and reviewing when the attorney is sending us things for an operating agreement so we can legally get investment dollars in. So all of those things are happening in tandem, typically.
All right, so then what happens?
Then ideally, the vision of what they want to happen is carried out through whether it's the reading, the workshop, all of those sorts of middle steps. And if I get a project that even the script is in good shape, but they haven't had any of that, I will encourage them to do that.
Okay, let's say they did that. They rented, a studio, spent 2 weeks, spent $70,000. Now it's called, Manatee in Love. They even changed the name of the musical when they were in, and so they're back and they say, now we're ready. We even have more funding. How do we do it? Like, now what?
So we'll talk through venues, and then my job, which is typically ensconced in the general management scope of my position, and also a little bit the executive producer scope, I will reach out to all of the venues that are on the list and have been agreed upon by everybody, and I will do my damnedest to get them a venue. And that process can take a very long time and take unique twists and turns.
What is a very long time? We're talking about weeks, months, years?
Depending on the project, it can be a few months. There's a hole in a schedule and we can plug in a 4-person show. We have to just move like lightning to, I have a very charming, lovely musical with an awesome score, a nostalgic musical, for example, and we were getting ready to open it right before COVID happened. And that producer who has moxie and determination, we really wanted an open-ended commercial venue. And as I mentioned, they're very hard to come by. And so she kept working. We workshopped it 2.5, 3 years ago now in New Jersey, and we were supposed to open it in March, and we went to Chicago with it. We found it.
Okay, interesting.
So it can really vary because projects, when I do the budget, there's a whole breakout series of sheets on the budget of what you need to make the dollars match. That's called a break even. So we need a certain amount of capacity of tickets. I expect in the coming years that will become archaic because tickets are starting to, with dynamic pricing, change like airline tickets. So
Right.
it's not stagnant with the pricing as it used to be. But for right now, that's a structure that a lot of the regime are comfortable with. So we know, even though like with that show, for example, we probably could have gotten a smaller venue, but we needed at least 375 seats in the venue to run it. So that makes the list very small. I have a 6-person lovely play that was going into rehearsal the week after COVID started. And that one, it was more about having the space. We wanted to have a turntable. We wanted to do all these things with the set, but it's a small cast. So we had flexibility as long as I was able to negotiate with the venue for us to have kind of free reign to do what we wanted. So that list of the availability for that was a lot longer, and we were able to, that took about a year to find space.
So it's a matchmaking, you know, not every show will work for the venue. Some venues will need deeper space, more capacity, height, etc. Okay, let's say you found, huh?
I said it's like House Hunters on steroids. Like you need,
That's
you need
exactly
the
right.
backyard space in the attic and that, you know.
So tell us, so Manatees in Love found a perfect venue. We had to wait 8 months for it to be available, but there it is. Now what?
So immediately we start to engage our team. And as the GM, the general manager, it's my job to negotiate all of those contracts for the creative team and for the actors. And depending on the agency that they're represented by and the level of production, it can be very complex to make a deal, or it can go very, very quickly. So those things start to happen very fast. The production calendar gets made the moment we have the dates, and the production management team is brought on. And that person, the production manager, is responsible for dealing with the technical aspects and the coordination of the creative team with their design visions, as well as leading production meetings, managing tech, load in, strike, all of those things, soup to nuts, working hand in hand with the general management office. So that's another position that gets hired immediately.
Okay. And now what?
And then it's kind of all systems go, right? So if you
so when you read, you know, as a GM, do you negotiate with all with the agents, with all agents of all creative? Is that your job?
Yep. And it's dealing with all of the unions on getting all of the union contracts done, which happens pretty early on. It's maintaining the budget. So you don't just make the budget and walk away, right? It's the tweaking of that and making sure that that budget you made that got filed with the government stays within the lines. And what that looks like, the day-to-day management of that can be very tricky. Telling a director that there's no money for this thing that they feel like they just have to have can be really challenging, but you also want to ask the right questions, because if they do ultimately feel like whatever this thing is that they need, the whole team is unanimous with that, you want to try to find that money in the budget and how that works. So all of those conversations that cross creative, financial, left and right side of my brain are happening every day on multiple projects. No day in my office is the same as the last.
I bet. And so, okay, so you have your team set, you announce casting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to do some sort of, you know, a casting called choose your actors. You already have your design team. And then how soon do you start selling tickets?
It also varies with that. With Off-Broadway, we want to have a bigger lead time because it doesn't have the exposure, obviously, and we are competing with the Broadway marketplace. But we need to have enough pieces put into play so the New York ticket buyer wants to buy a ticket. So while all of those things are happening with the creative team, on the business end and on the process end, the marketing team and the PR team is also being engaged in creating those plans and those conversations we talked about earlier in our chat of who to market to, what the goal is, the key art, which is the, you know, the title treatment, any images, all of those things are quickly getting made and being discussed. So with the tickets going on sale, and also with the lack of ease with getting off Broadway to kind of make a dent in the news, we want to have everything all in a line. So when the publicist makes an announcement, we ideally want to be able to make tickets on sale. So there's a big difference in an approach of that play I just mentioned that has a few very prominent off-Broadway actors whose names you would probably not recognize, but you would recognize their faces from TV spots, etc. There's a different play for that, which is a very solid family drama with off-Broadway actors, as opposed to a giant revival of a Broadway musical being done off-Broadway, which I'm also working on. And how those things are marketed, right? Because the new play doesn't have name recognition. It has a new playwright with an interesting backstory, but nobody knows who he is yet. And then a major, musical title. Those two things marketed very, very differently, obviously. So you want to have as many pieces as possible to make it easier for the marketing and press team to sell when you announce and go on sale. But you also want to make sure that you've balanced it where there's still a sense of urgency. If you're announcing a show to go on sale, this is again pre-pandemic, right? All bets are off on the,
yes.
But,
we don't know about Zoom producing. That's a whole other. That's
oh my
a whole
God,
other.
I'm doing that right now. I have a show that was supposed to be playing off Broadway right now that they just started filming 14 minutes ago. It's crazy. I'm learning so much, but you don't want to for off Broadway, you don't want to announce and put a show on sale a year out because nobody knows what they're going to be doing in a year. You want to have that sense of urgency with enough time for people to plan, which is tricky to navigate. And the marketing and PR team always has an opinion on that. So.
All right. So you open a show, and then how does your job changes from a pre-production job to a production to once we are in performances? How does your job change?
It ramps up even more. So you can feel kind of the build in our office, right? Going from the early pre-production of in our weekly meetings, the check-ins of what's going on, and then leading into rehearsal, the calendar of focus will shift, and that show that's going into rehearsals will take a precedent in the office. We'll have company managers on board for each of the shows that will start prior to rehearsals and be in the office in the day-to-day. So it goes from a planning startup phase to launch to a full-time day-to-day prospect. So for my office, it's important that we have proper staffing for each, so each show gets the attention it deserves. I intentionally keep my office team tight, and I keep a full plate for us, but we are a boutique management firm because I like having my hands in and being involved in all the teams. When I'm working with clients, I want them to know that they're getting me, and it will be the rarity when I'm not present, and also for my teams to be fully ensconced and be able to take ownership over things, and everybody to know what's in each other's brains. So it really revs up into a full-time all hands on deck. Because when the vendors open at 9 a.m., we have to be reachable for problems. And when then there's a tech meeting at 11 o'clock that night and there's a 10 out of 12 tech rehearsal, we're there too. So the balance of that, it becomes quite consuming from a time schedule, time management perspective.
It's interesting about your office. I want to say there, 20 years from now, there's going to be students for people of our community who were lucky enough to be your students. For a period, you were there for what, how long were you at for?
Yeah, 5 years.
And in those 5 years, you took some students under your wing, brought them to New York when you were working, interned with you on shows. Some of them you hired, some of them you mentor. I bet that 20 years from now, there are going to be great producers, great leaders that came out of you taking an interest on them. And that is something that I've always admired very much of you, is that you really, as a teacher, you brought students outside of the classroom for them to really get involved and understand what it is to produce theater. You used to do it, at Miami New Drama, the Colony Theater. We had a lot of interns, and now, we have Gabriel in his first year at producing at Columbia University, a really wonderful and elite program. Go Lions. You have Sophia. Tell me about Sophia, who was an intern. Sophia Cabral was an intern.
Mhm.
Also a student of yours. She's still working at LDK.
Yes. So we met when she, I think, was a sophomore at UM, and she took an interest in producing and management, and she has been with me ever since. And I am the luckiest GM in the world to have her. She is my right hand, and my rock in the company, and we are a team, and that's been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. And she just got promoted to assistant general manager before COVID happened. So,
Amazing.
yeah, and I'm. Your words were so kind, but these with former students like Sophia, and I am so lucky to get to be a little part of them discovering what producing and general management is, and seeing Sophia flourish and her instincts, and the way that she embraces teams. It's really been also one of the most rewarding parts of my career. And also seeing what Gabe is doing and what Stephanie's doing, who has been with you all now for years.
That's right. That's right. That she was a student of yours.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and seeing these students up here in New York too, and what they're doing, and running into them at the theater and finding out they're working on shows. I never thought I would be a college professor, and it is really wonderful, and I think important that we lift our young people up, and make sure people are aware that this is a very viable career path, because it's not being taught enough.
But it's impressive. You walk the walk and you talk. You've been doing that always. You've always sent the elevator down to bring more people up, and I so admire that of you. So we spoke a little bit about what it's producing, and we went into detail about off-Broadway as an example. Now, let's talk about the differences between that process that we just spoke about, and briefly regional theater. Walk us a little bit about how that is different from a regional theater, and then we're going to talk about Broadway also, a little bit more brief, less briefly than this, but talk about, for a nonprofit regional theater, how is this process different?
Sure.
Other than it happens 4 or 5 times a year over and on a repeat mode.
Well, and that's the beginning of the big difference here, right? So hands-on management is hands-on management. Artists are artists, right? So you can do a show with, like, for example, when we did Chad Deity, Jen Weinman, our brilliant director, that came down, I've done commercial theater with her. So these artists are jumping in both arenas, and they know the differences, but their processes as artists and creatives are still similar, regardless of the structure of the way the company's set up, right? So this management position, and whatever track we want to say that is. And I remember, Michelle, when we were starting our dream and growing it, we had no idea like what to call me, right? Because it's all consuming, and it was tricky to find the right title.
That's right.
The what I love as a manager and a producer, and often they are very intertwined. There are several regional theaters that have one or the other, and nonprofit theaters in New York. And only when you get to a certain tier of budget do you typically have layers of executive producers or producing directors and then general managers. And what I love about the nonprofit world and the regional theater world is exactly what you just said. You're doing 4 or 5 productions, you're building a family that lasts, and a family that has to sustain and have a strong foundation and have that family atmosphere, at least from the way that I like to manage things, but also it is a business, right? So you have employees, and they're also your family, and you're making art with them. So that is one of the greatest gifts and also one of the challenges. Furthermore, with that, with the 4 or 5 productions, you're ensconced in your community if you're doing it right? So as you're building, you are getting the best board members you can from a vibrancy perspective of who your community is. And also you're building things for the long haul. When your subscribers are subscribing to your season, they're subscribing to your mission statement. They're subscribing to who you are as leaders of your organization. They're not buying a one-off ticket to go to a musical. So I absolutely love that part of it. And that component of it, and you know, the tremendous work you all are doing down there, I miss the day-to-dayness of that. I miss being with you, Michelle, before the shows and watching you greet our patrons and saying hi and knowing who that person was and taking care of them, and being so thrilled to announce our season and the chaotic push to like get there, and dealing with also getting to collaborate with government officials who believe in what you're doing.
Right, and that was a big part of especially really where, you know, one of the home runs you meet is that, you know, when we, after Golem, the success of Golem, we approached the city of Miami Beach and asked them, listen, you have this amazing venue run by a for-profit company that's just renting it out, you know, give it to us, we'll turn it into a world-class regional theater. And I think it was easier to convince the politicians, but we needed to convince the staff. And the staff asked us for a comprehensive business plan, kind of assuming that we were not going to be able to create one. They were like, well, you know, by next week we need like a business plan of what it is. And I remember, you know, then became a good friend, Max Clark, who was then heading the Culture and Economic Affairs Office, looking at the business plan that you and only you had created, impressed. And there was that moment like, oh, yeah, they know what they're doing. And that was kind of a key turning moment. That I think it was like close to 100-page business plan that you created. And that really was what got Miami New Drama, you know, the column. We already had the love of the politicians. The commissioners wanted to do it, but you convinced the staff in a plan that made sense.
Well, but in that meeting where we handed them all out, and you and I were petrified going in and determined with you know, with our team to do this, and they were going through it and getting to hear your passion for it, that was one of the best days of my life, when we knew we were going to get the theater because of that. And it was a culmination for me, bringing it back to the producing and management, your vision as an artistic director and a leader, getting to hear your passion for that and see these people respond to it with the materials that I had provided to help that journey, was such a highlight for me. And again, that's the best of being a producer and a manager in regional theater. It's
Amen.
So
Amen. So now take us to Broadway. Lisa, you left Miami because Broadway came calling. Tell us about that. Tell us about the experience from the beginning of Be More Chill to all the way how it you know, went to Broadway. Tell us.
Crazy journey. So I had assisted on Broadway before. I'd worked with clients that were Broadway, you know, our Broadway producers, ensconced in that community for a very long time. I'm, as I mentioned, very, very happy with my business and working with the artists that I'm, you know, getting to work with and all of that. And one of my dear friends, Jerry Gehring, who's a Broadway executive and lead producer, called me when I was actually at the Colony when he called me, working on our set for Chad Deity. And he said, hey, I have this project. Do you have a minute? And I said, sure. he said, well, you know, we both love Joe Iconis and his family of artists. I know that you're friends with them and I'm friends with them. Do you want to do that show, Be More Chill, that, you know, that all these young people are listening to online? What if we just did it for the summer commercially in New York?
Because it was produced first in New Jersey.
Yes, it was
right?
first produced at Two River Theater in New Jersey. And that was in summer of 2015. And they raised the money to do a cast album, and for posterity, and because they were proud of the piece, and they did it, and it went viral. And a major factor of that is a song called Michael in the Bathroom that George Salazar sings. George and I had worked together a few times before, and we're dear friends. And that song had kind of taken over the Spotify playlists for the younger set of musical theater fans, and had become kind of this worldwide phenomenon. So they started getting a lot of online recognition and fans through that. And so Jerry had been out to dinner with Joe Iconis and Lauren Marcus, who is an actress and a singer-songwriter, and also was in the cast of Be More Chill. And they were talking about the success of the album online and how crazy it was. And then he called me, and our intent was really to spend the summer doing this with these artists that we love and giving the show a commercial production. And at every turn, when things kept getting announced, or we went on sale with our tickets — I was also at the Colony the day that we went on sale. That was exciting. Jerry and I started calling each other and saying, is there something bigger? Like, what is happening here? Let's put our noses to the ground, work with these artists, have an amazing summer, and see what happens. So we lined up the Signature Theater on 42nd Street, their 294 seat theater. And we got this phenomenal cast, which was comprised partially of the actors from Two River, and then we added some new people to the cast. Will Rowland was our lead, who had just come out of Dear Evan Hansen. And we did it, and we sold out before we opened. The New York Times hated the show. Didn't matter, because we'd sold out, which was great. And hated it from the perspective that it was not for them, right? Not a show for Ben Brantley. So we had this phenomenal summer where we had these young people coming from all over the world to see the production, and being so deeply moved at getting to see it live. It was an energy in that theater I will never forget. And then we were we were like more than halfway through our run, and the Schubert organization, which owns and operates the largest amount of theaters on Broadway out of the theater owners, they also operate an off-Broadway venue, called Jerry and asked for a meeting, and we weren't sure at that moment whether it would be Broadway or off-Broadway, and they offered us the Lyceum Theater. So we transferred it to Broadway. We played for 6 months. And then we were lucky enough, Jerry and I took it over to London as co-executive producers. And we had just opened and gotten rave reviews in London, and we're scheduled to recoup with some exciting news on that front, and the longevity of Chill in London. And then COVID happened. But this is the show that I now had been blessed to work with off-Broadway, on Broadway, and in London, and we were getting ready to take it to Chicago. So it was my first credit as a general manager on Broadway. It was phenomenal in regards to how embracing the Broadway community was from a management perspective, and also fascinating to see the differences between Broadway and off-Broadway with the show's creation, and how we manifested it with the process. The biggest thing with that difference of that are the dollars on the budget, right? Our off-Broadway budget was, without giving exact numbers, in the $1 to $2 million range. And then the Broadway budget was, in the 10 to 12 million range. So all of those dollars getting added. And then also The biggest difference is, from a management perspective, are the unions. There are a lot less unions, and it's much more hands-on with who you're hiring for your crew and all of that off-Broadway as opposed to on Broadway.
Right, right. And that's a whole other challenge. So, must have been hard to close a show on Broadway.
It was, and we had our heartbreaking, challenging moments, on Broadway, with closing. But we were so proud of what we did for 6 months, and that was the goal. So
who would have thought, right? A show that really the fans took it to Broadway. That's something extremely strange to happen. It's not greedy. It's the fans that took it out in Spotify and made it a hit album, and then the fans were the ones that created a platform for the off-Broadway run and for the Broadway run. It's there's not another example like it, I don't think.
Right, and it was so out of the box that's where a lot of those moments came from, and we went into it thrilled that we were going to be able to show more of these fans what the show was and give them more opportunities to see it. So we were very proud of our 6-month run, and we knew it was a part of the journey for Chill, and it wasn't the end, which we were grateful for. So we had this phenomenal, wonderful, incredible 6 months of these fans seeing the show, and now having, pre-COVID, with getting ready to roll it out around the country and the world, is pretty thrilling, grounded in what happened here in New York.
Right. Listen, I mean, COVID changed the world for all of us. As we were opening our first pre-Broadway, hopefully what was billed as our first pre-Broadway show, which was A Wonderful World, that had enhancement money, that made us have a budget of $1.5 million, which, as it's 3 or 4 times what we normally have at Miami New Drama, and we couldn't even open that show. But listen, the world is we now have coming up next month, the 7 Deadly Sins, which we have commissioned 7 top playwrights from across the nation to write each a 10-minute show around one of the deadly sins. And they'll be taking place in the storefronts of Lincoln Road of the 1100 block. So you have to just reimagine what theater can be under these circumstances. Anyway, so before we open it to questions and answers, tell us a little bit about your new venture as an educator, as well as your continued venturing as a producer. But tell us about the new program that you're starting.
Sure. So at the University of Miami, when I came down, there was a legacy of a theater management program. And as we just spoke about with the empowerment of young people and the education of young people who love theater, that this is a career path. I think we need more management programs around the country at the undergraduate level. And I was lucky enough during my time at UM to collaborate with Miles Wilkin on a phenomenal course where we brought experts at the very top of the—
Tell us who Miles is, for the uninformed.
Sure. So Miles Wilkin is one of the founders of Broadway Across America, and one of the key players in our industry who shaped what Broadway touring is today, in a nutshell. He is a Tony Lifetime Achievement Award winner, and also one of my most favorite people on the planet. And we quickly became fast friends in Miami, and his ambition and goals to bring this knowledge to young people was so moving and in line with how I felt about it, that we made a perfect teaching team. And he went to the University of Florida. So when I left at the University of Miami and came back here, we were really trying to figure out where would be a good fit to continue that work at the undergraduate level. And he spoke with the University of Florida, and they were interested in talking about this with us. So we flew down, we met with them, had several discussions, taught a course last year, and flew down some phenomenal artists and producers. And then we really started to take shape, and we got approval to start the theater management program earlier this year, which is so
Amazing.
exciting to me. And the thought of—
You get to create a program from the ground up, like you got to create a regional theater from the ground up. You're a builder of things, Dozier King.
Well, and the idea that these students will be exposed to this and get and for the artists to be able to take these courses and see the business end of it for the appreciation, and also so they have more knowledge going into the industry is pretty exciting to me. And I may be an adult life New Yorker, but I was born in Miami, and so I do have Florida roots, and I'm very, very proud that we were able to keep the program in Florida. So.
Amazing, amazing. A good moment as a plane is flying over my head, if you can hear it, to open the floor for questions. Anyone has any questions for the bright Lisa Dozier King? So there's a different ways you can do it. You can either raise your hand or you can write it in the Q&A section. There's a button, a Q&A button, and you can write there on the bottom right and just type in your questions, anything you want to know about producing, but we're too afraid to ask. This is the moment. So I'll ask one question until you're ready for yours, dear audience. Lisa, you have 3 kids. How do you do it? How can you do all the work you're doing and raise a family? I'm asking for a friend.
It's a lot easier when we're not doing remote school.
I bet.
A big part of this is that for me is that theater is, as it is in your family, a way of life. And my kids are very involved and know what I'm working on. Maddie, my oldest, who loves Michelle, went with me to London. She sat through an ACT meeting. She wagered her opinions because she knows Be More Chill very well. And I take her and the little ones. I've started to do that pre-COVID. I take them to the theater. They know who the artists are on stage. They're involved in that. They pick theater tickets for presents, and I take them to the theater because I want them to have an idea of what it is that I do, and when I'm gone at night, what I'm doing and what I'm doing for our family, and also I have 2 girls and a little boy. I think it's also crucial for them to see the normalcy of women in management, and to see that I work very hard and have my whole career to be my authentic self throughout, whether I'm at home or whether I'm in a meeting, and to see that regardless of what I do for a living and what arena I work in is really important to me. So it's normalized and they're empowered with what women leadership is. So.
Well, and they couldn't really have a more extraordinary example. So lucky them. So here's a few questions. We have the first question is, how did you go about making connection with the different venues you work with? Good question.
That is a great question. So a lot of that, as with networking and everything, the industry here in New York is about that big. So your work speaks for yourself, but also who you are as a person speaks for yourself. Right. Which kind of goes back to what I was just saying about my kids and the networking with the venues. A lot of the venue managers that I deal with, I've been dealing with for a very long time when they worked in other places. So it's all about relationships up here and authentic relationships.
Right. It's a great answer to a great question. Carla is asking, how early or late in the Be More Chill process did you know you wanted the show to move to London?
So with London, we had gotten some bites that there was some interest. And Chris Harper, who's a phenomenal producer from London that now lives here because he's heading up the company Revival. He came and saw the show. We had a great meeting with him, and Jerry and I started to have this spidey sense that there could be a real market for it over there. And so we knew. He and I went over to London in July. We closed in August on Broadway, July of 2019, and knew well before the rest of the world knew that we were going to take it to London. We had that in play before closing on Broadway.
Well, and what makes a show you think resonate on Broadway, in London, then, how would you know, like what makes an audience in London feel that this show would resonate with them? Why did you have that sense?
Well, the show and our brilliant creative team, led by Stephen Brackett, our director, due to various figures with what we did in London, we really brought the show back down. We let the show speak for itself without as many of the bells and whistles from Broadway and the storytelling of it. And the show, while being a kooky sci-fi show, has a lot of heart. It's about being feeling like you don't fit in at a party, feeling like you're an outcast, and then going on the journey to own your weirdoness, right? Which a lot of us theater folk and theater patrons can identify with. So we worked really hard on driving that story home under his leadership, and we knew that story would resonate with the British audience. We were hopeful, and we also knew that the kooky sci-fi part of it is something that the British audience may really, have gotten a kick out of. And we were lucky as the reviews spoke to both of those things.
Wonderful. So we have a question by a good friend, Lowell Williams, that I guess it's more directed towards me than to you, but we'll both try to make an effort at responding to it. What do you suggest a brand new playwright here in Miami who sees getting a play produced locally in Miami? My ultimate goal would be to see one of my plays produced at Miami New Drama, not looking to New York or Broadway as the ultimate. What should be my first step? Well, my friend Lowell Williams, who we love very much, I think you've taken the first step. We workshopped we did a small workshop with one of your plays last year. We did a reading of it, just a day. And I think that those development opportunities that now are going to be even more available for Miami New Drama moving forward, hopefully, if we get to expand our footprint to a second development venue, I think that the first steps is to take, every chance we have of a development opportunity that we will be, announcing, to apply for those development opportunities and to have the show grow inside of one of our programs, and then it's easier to get into consideration, I would say. No, Lisa, right? All right. Austin Barr says, what advice do you have for younger artists out of college who are moving to New York and are interested in producing?
So circling back to the downtown comment, I would do the Fringe Festival. I would do the Fresh Fruit Festival, all of these things when they come back, and really get your feet wet on them. I think also working at, whether it's a commercial management office, producing office, or nonprofit, the business side of it, get a job learning from the people that have been doing it for a long time. And when you do those things, make yourself the most valuable person in the room. One time I had a Broadway producer who's retired now, call me about something 10 years after I'd left Manhattan Theater Club. And we kept in loose touch. And I said, why did you think of me for this project? He said, well, I've been following your career. And I also knew when you were in that high stakes situation at Manhattan Theater Club and your job was to get lunch for everybody, and there were 14 very strong personalities, whether they're picking a play that could win the Pulitzer or whether or not they want mustard on their sandwich, they have strong opinions. And the way that you took care of everybody and your attention to detail, you can't teach that. Either somebody makes it a priority to have that or they don't. So earn your keep and be the most useful assistant in the room, and it will serve you well because you will build those contacts throughout that will take you on. I have done in my downtown the shows that I did earlier on in my career, those people have gone on to win Pulitzers, to be Academy Award nominated. Countless people have been, now I'll work on Broadway. So building that foundation, and a lot of that starts if you're in college now with your peers that are going to stay in the industry. So build those contacts and pay your dues.
And I will add to this, be like Lisa in terms of the next generation. Part of what will help people succeed as producers is people who've already made it, giving them a hand. So, in the same way that Lisa have taken on the students and has, helped them rise up, if any of those listening are in a position, whether it's producing or in any other aspect of life, maybe different jobs, always, take advantage of your situation to help others, help them rise as well. And it has proven a great investment. The not only have the people that Lisa have helped done great in life, but there's a feeling that it's worth more than anything to know, that those people are doing great, and you had a little to do with it. So, or a lot to do with it. Anyway, I think that there's no any other final questions for the great Lisa Dozier King. Lisa, before we finish, just briefly, let's touch upon, we're all under the assumption that fall of 2021, doors are going to open, it's all going to be back to normal. We lost a year and a half, but things will go on. What if they don't? What if we'll never get, or it takes a few more years to get that complete normalcy back? What then?
I think, we're all operating under this September 2021 school of thought, but I do also think that the normalcy of what we're thinking that's going to look like may manifest very differently, even if we can do, some theater. And what gives me hope is that theater has been around for such a long time that we will continue to persevere, just like, the Romans had theater. There was theater that was halted by the Spanish flu, and then the artistic renaissance happened following that. So I think that the adaptation of that will be interesting, and the use of technology and not overuse of it, finding that balance will be fascinating. But I think we're going to see a lot more small productions where it's easier to make the bottom line work, at least in the commercial world, with balancing if we are still doing social distancing and what that looks like. But I do think for those of us that stand our ground, we will come back with a vengeance, and people will be hungry for that connection, and also for the artistry of what we do and the humanity of what we do that's in a room that you can't get on a screen.
Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that. Lisa Dozier King, this has been a personal delight for me to be able to talk to you for a long, extended period of time. I haven't done that in a while. Your success makes us all extremely proud. We root for you. We know that you're going to find new ventures and new ways of continuing, to produce and continue to bring amazing stories to the stage. And now that you've tasted Broadway, I think that you'll stay in those waters for a while. Um, but again, I just want to once again publicly say how key and important you were to the creation of Miami New Drama. It would not have happened the way it did without you. It was a godsend that I got to meet you very early on. And and you really are an inspiration, and I love you very much. And I look forward to seeing you, and all the best to you and your beautiful family, and everybody else. Stay safe, wear your masks. It totally makes a difference. If you want to see a show of Lisa on Broadway, the sooner that happens is when we
Please
all wear
get
masks.
your friends and family to wear their masks. Everybody wears masks.
That's right. That's right. Thank you all for coming and joining us. This conversation will live forever on our YouTube channel. So if you want to recommend it, or if there are portions of it that you like to listen to again, it's colony.org, Mastermind, and go to our archivals. And Madame LDK, thank you for
Thank you for
spending some
having
time.
me. Anytime. I miss you all so much.
We'll see you very soon, I hope.
Love to you
All
and your
right.
family and the full team down there.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.